She hid the pregnancy after divorce, not knowing the billionaire would discover the test. The day Mara signed the divorce papers, it rained with the kind of persistence that felt personal. The lawyer's office smelled of old coffee and lemon polish, and the pen trembled in her fingers as she wrote her name for the last time beneath Adrian Cole's. Billionaire. Visionary. Her husband, formerly. She told herself it was relief she felt when she walked out, not grief. Relief that the arguments were over, relief that she no longer had to live inside a glass house where every feeling echoed too loudly. What she didn't tell anyone, what she didn't yet tell herself, was that her body was already carrying a secret. The pregnancy test lay wrapped in tissue at the bottom of her handbag, unopened. She had bought it that morning on impulse, tucked between a carton of milk and a loaf of bread, as if it were nothing more than another errand. She would take it later, she promised herself. After the papers, after the rain stopped, after she figured out how to breathe again. 3 days later, alone in her apartment, a modest place she'd chosen deliberately, far from Adrian's penthouse skyline, the test bloomed pink in her trembling hands. 2 lines, clear, unforgiving. Mara sank to the bathroom floor, the cool tile grounding her as her mind raced ahead of her heart. A child, Adrian's child. The irony was sharp enough to hurt. For years, they had talked about timing, about stability, about how the world expected perfection from a man like him. There was always another deal, another launch, another reason to wait. Now, after the end, the beginning had arrived. She made a decision that same night. She would keep the baby. And she would not tell Adrian. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was self-preservation. Adrian's life was a carefully controlled ecosystem, and she had learned the hard way how little space there was for variables. A baby would be a variable he would try to manage, to own. She wanted this child to belong to herself first. Weeks passed, then months. Mara settled into a quiet rhythm, morning sickness masked by ginger tea, looser sweaters to hide the subtle changes, a job at a small design firm where no one asked questions. She learned the language of prenatal appointments and the comfort of hearing a heartbeat through static. Adrian remained a distant headline. His face on business magazines. His voice on podcasts. She avoided his name the way one avoids pressing on a bruise. What she didn't know was that secrets, like gravity, have a way of pulling things together. The discovery happened by accident, an almost laughable twist of fate. Adrian was hosting a charity gala at the city's most exclusive hotel, an event Mara had no intention of attending. But her firm had been contracted last minute to adjust the stage visuals, and her boss begged her to go, just for an hour. She told herself she could handle it. She wore a black dress with a forgiving cut, her pregnancy still early enough to pass unnoticed. She kept her head down, focused on her tablet, counting minutes. Adrian saw her anyway. He always had, even when he pretended not to. Later, alone in the private lounge after the event, Adrian loosened his tie and tried to shake the strange sense of déjà vu clinging to him. He hadn't spoken to Mara, hadn't wanted to risk reopening wounds, but the sight of her had unsettled him more than he expected. When his assistant handed him a folder of receipts accidentally collected from the green room, items left behind in the rush, he flipped through them absently. A lipstick, a phone charger, and then a crumpled pharmacy receipt, the ink slightly smudged. He wouldn't have noticed if not for the date. 3 days after their divorce. His eyes caught on the item line, pregnancy test, digital. The room seemed to tilt. Adrian stared at the receipt as if it might change if he looked hard enough. Logic fought instinct. It could belong to anyone. Staff, a guest, anyone at all. But he knew. He knew the way one knows when a truth clicks into place, rearranging everything that came before it. Memories surfaced unbidden. Mara's quiet distraction in those final weeks, the way she pressed a hand to her stomach when she thought he wasn't looking, the sudden urgency with which she'd insisted on the divorce proceeding quickly. For the first time in years, Adrian felt something he couldn't buy or negotiate his way out of. Fear. He didn't call her that night. Or the next day. He hired a private investigator instead, hating himself even as he did it. Confirmation came swiftly, clinically, with ultrasound appointment records and insurance details. Mara was pregnant, with his child. When he finally stood at her door weeks later, it was raining again. Mara froze when she saw him through the peephole. Her first instinct was to pretend she wasn't home. Her second was to run. She did neither. She opened the door. They stared at each other, the years between them compressed into a single breath. "You knew," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Adrian nodded, his voice rough. I found the test. Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. I wasn't going to tell you, Mara said, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach now rounded enough to be undeniable. I needed this to be mine. Not a headline, not a negotiation. I know, he said, surprising her. And I hate that I gave you reason to think you had to hide. Emotion flickered across his face, regret, longing, something softer. For once, there were no lawyers, no assistants, no boardrooms. Just two people standing at the edge of something irreversible. I don't want to take this from you, Adrian continued. But I want to be here. If you'll let me. Mara searched his eyes for the man she'd loved, the one buried beneath ambition and control. She didn't know what the future would look like, whether forgiveness was possible, whether trust could be rebuilt. But she knew this child would change everything. Being here doesn't mean owning, she said. It means listening. Adrian nodded again, slower this time. Then I'll learn. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. Inside, something fragile and new took its first breath.